right, let's do this one more time for a Friday, a muggy Friday, at least here in the nation's capital. What's happening, everybody? Matt Robinson with you here in the TCA studio in beautiful Bytown, Canada. We mentioned the other day that we were having some trouble connecting with Bunda. The power had gone down. We were going to connect remotely at his cottage. One of those freak little muggy storms blew through, put a tree branch right on his power line, and that was the end of his ability to get on the show. So we dropped some audio for you that Rob and I had pre-recorded. Hope you enjoyed that. That came out on Wednesday afternoon, if you want to go back and check that out. Episode 1549, which makes this episode 1550. And we thank you for checking in on it. Rob back in here on Monday. We'll get into, it's been a while since he was here, so whatever's on his mind. But at the rate things are going right now around the hockey world, there will be plenty to get into. Also, the Blue Jays lose on Thursday afternoon to the Arizona Diamondbacks, but win another series, so that was interesting. The Ottawa Red Blacks are starting their third quarterback, and if I check my calendar here, it is week 3. Not ideal, so we'll see how that plays out on Saturday out in Calgary, where it's supposed to be under like 10 degrees and rain and drizzle and whatever else. So that could be fucking miserable. I do wonder if that's why you go with Dustin Crum, who I think most of us thought was kind of at third string, but if you're worried that slinging the ball around and a lot of passes isn't going to work in weather like that, maybe you throw Crum in there. Guy likes to run, likes to use his legs. If you're without your starter for 2 of the first 3 weeks of the season, you can throw whatever you want at the wall. It's not ideal, but maybe that is one reason to go with Crum here this week. Anyway, not what we're here to talk about this time. Point being, Rob back on Monday morning, and there will be plenty of meat on the bone as we get into buyout season. It's draft week. We're just over a week and a half away from NHL free agency. Plenty to get to then. As for today, it's just me and you. I shouldn't say that. It's not just me and you. It's me and you and a Hazy Days New England IPA from Cowbell Brewing Company. We've had it a bunch of times here before, so we won't spend any kind of time on it. Look, it's been an interesting, let's call it 36 hours. We've seen some reasonably big names, or at least some names that were being talked about a lot, come off the board. Matt Duchene has re-signed. Ryan Donato has re-signed. Fabian Zetterlund right here in Ottawa has re-signed. And everything has wrinkles, right? Everything creates just tiny little ripples, tiny little waves, and maybe you wonder, what does that mean for my guy in terms of setting a market? Or that was a guy that I sort of had an eye on for my team who's not going to be available now. By all accounts, as we sit here, for some reason, the Minnesota Wild are giving up on trying to figure things out and make it work with Marco Rossi. They're going to trade that guy. And there's not much out there now if you're looking for someone to be your number 2 center in a division like the Central, where Minnesota wants to compete. And Minnesota finally is getting out from under most of whatever you'd want to call it, the debacle that they created for themselves with the Ryan Suter and Zach Parise signings, the eventual buyouts, the years of cap hell that put them in. I think last year they had a $14 million cap hit still from those guys sitting there from their buyouts. Most of that goes away. I think there's still going to be something like $2 million on the books next year. But in theory, Bill Guerin has the opportunity for the first time in a long time to go out and make his team better, and instead he's trading away his number 2C for, I don't know, by all accounts, Brock Nelson was their guy. That's who they were going to look to try and bring home to the Minnesota area. He re-ups in Colorado. Matt Duchene is off the board. Nothing is done yet, but it sounds like John Tavares wants to stay in Toronto. All of a sudden, your center options are drying up pretty quick unless you are prepared to do something stupid which someone is going to do, for Sam Bennett. I guess it could be Minnesota. I think at the end of the day, Bennett will find a way to stay. I think he's happy there. Why wouldn't he be? He's about to get a raise. He's won 2 Stanley Cups, the tax thing, the weather thing. I would be surprised if he left, and I would definitely be surprised if he left for Minnesota. But money talks, and if he makes it to July 1, maybe that's your option. I don't know why I'm suddenly talking about the Minnesota Wild. There may not be a more dull, uninteresting team in the league than the Minnesota Wild. Point being, dominoes are starting to fall. And if you were Minnesota and you were looking at maybe adding a Matt Duchene, that option's no longer on the table for you. Look, let's start here in Ottawa. We woke up on Thursday morning to the news, or mid-morning anyway, to the news that Fabian Zetterlund is staying right here in the nation's capital. It's 3 years at $4.275 million. And I think, I warn you, because I think we're going to be bringing this up a lot here over the next week or two while we're doing the free agency thing and the re-signings thing. The reminder of the cap explosion and what you thought a guy might be worth needing to be recalibrated for the fact that the cap is jumping so big over the next 3 years. And so I see some people that are saying, when you take that into consideration, that's a pretty good price for Fabian Zetterlund. And over here, I'm kind of sitting there going, at a flat cap world, I got time for Fabian Zetterlund at $4.2 million on my cap. Young guy, still got 2 years left, or did, of being RFA, arbitration eligible before becoming a UFA. So you did buy 1 year of unrestricted free agency. It's a guy who last year scored 19 goals and 41 points. Splitting the season between San Jose and Ottawa. And look, I remember doing that show on the evening. Well, I did 3 shows on the evening of the NHL trade deadline. And I loved this move for Ottawa. And I will admit to being perhaps a little underwhelmed with how it went when he got here. And probably a little bit during the playoffs as well. But if I'm being fair to the guy, when he got to Ottawa, Ottawa was in the midst of a pretty good run where they had 3 lines that were all sort of clicking pretty well. Now, I guess that's a little disingenuous because Dylan Cousins had just gotten here. But, Dylan Cousins was brought in specifically to be the second line center. So Zetterlund was never getting a crack at that spot anyway. He's not a center. He wasn't going to have that spot. So when you dropped Dylan Cousins into the lineup, it was pretty obvious where he was going to go, and it was just a question of who was going to fit around with him. But once they got up and going, it was sort of like, okay, Zetterlund, you're going to play on the 4th line for now. We like our 3rd line and how that's playing. We like our top line and how that's playing. Give us some time. Guys get hurt, things stop working. We'll sort of figure this out. But those 3 lines kind of clicked for a long time in Ottawa. And so Zetterlund was he would move up and down in different game situations if they were trailing, but I never felt like, he was really given a great opportunity for an extended period of time to really establish himself. So if I'm going to say that he underwhelmed in Ottawa in his first, whatever it would have been, 20 games in the regular season, and then the first round, 6 games against Toronto, it needs to be acknowledged that it's not like opportunities were being thrown at him. Like I said, he got some where he was being moved up and down the lineup a little bit. And he did get chances to play with the top guys, but never for an extended period of time where you got to really see how he might fit. And maybe he's not going to be a top 6 guy. And hell, at $4.2 million, you don't really need him to be. But I think he can be. Over the next 3 years, he gets a full training camp. Gets a full off season in. I don't know whether he's spending any kind of time here in the nation's capital. Maybe you guys have run into him at Sobeys or something. But he's going to get, the captain's skates through September to really get to know guys, He's going to get a full training camp. Travis Green has had a full summer as head coach to kind of sit down and reevaluate where you might see this guy. And look, maybe you don't see him any higher than the bottom 6. I think that's a mistake. I would at least create an opportunity. I guess it depends what happens with Claude Giroux, who I assume at this point is coming back. But I think that is a diminishing asset. I'm not certain I would keep playing Claude Giroux on my top line. We'll see. We'll see what else Ottawa does. I'm also not sure I would play Fabian Zetterlund on my top line. So we'll see what happens here over the next couple of weeks. The point being, I liked the trade at the time. I was underwhelmed by the performance down the stretch, but I'm not willing to write it off at this point as something that hasn't worked. And I think 3 years at 4.275 for a guy like that, especially in an exploding cap world, is going to be just fine. I think that's a nice move for Ottawa. And as I said at the beginning, I get people trying to do that new cap math saying, I guess it's fine with the higher cap. In this cap world, I don't think this is a bad contract. It's probably at the high end of what I would pay him under these, stale cap rules we've had. But as it goes up, certainly it looks better and better. And we'll see where he fits in. The guy's an interesting guy, right? Like, he's kind of built like a fire hydrant. He's kind of hard to knock off the puck. But you need to give him some opportunities on the power play to be setting him up to shoot. You can't be playing him on the fourth line with some of the characters you had back there. But this move, 3 years, 4.2, as I said, doesn't clog up anything else you still got to do. Whether you want it to be Giroux, Adam Gaudette, I assume they're going to want to bring back. He cooled. He was always going to. He was never going to sustain the start that he had at the beginning of the year. What is the number for that guy? To me, I think that's a harder number to pin down. What is Adam Gaudette worth? A guy who's been in the minors, been in bottom sixes, been in top sixes, a guy you've seen have an unbelievable run. I would be careful not to pay him for that first half. But he's going to want it factored in that, see, I'm capable of that if you give me the right opportunities. So the point being, like I said, I think this is a good move for Ottawa, and I don't think it blocks them from doing any of the other important things. It was always going to be kind of a tight summer by the time you did the business that they needed to do and got guys re-signed. So whatever was planned before in terms of trades or anything, if they were going to shed money, I don't think anything changes. I think this is a nice piece of business, as the kids say. And I think you get off the hook from having to go to arbitration. I think the fewer times you have to do that, forget that you leave the final number in someone else's hand when you do that, like the arbitrator decides what a guy's going to make instead of you. It damages the relationship. The more times you have to go to somebody else and say, yeah, we like the guy, but he sucks at this and he's not good at that, and that's why we're not giving him what he wants. That sucks. It damages the relationship every time you have to do it. So Ottawa avoids that. I mentioned a couple other names there. Ryan Donato is an interesting one who re-signs in Chicago, and that makes sense to me. It's 4 years at $4 million. To me, this is one where you need the expanding cap to justify it. And it's not because I think it's terrible, but he is 29, and he scored 31 goals last year, which was double what he'd ever scored in any other year in his career. He's always been kind of a 12 to 15, 16 goal guy. So you can't pay him as a 30 goal guy moving forward. But if you're Chicago and you need to take a step forward and you need to be bringing in talent and you want to get better and better, you can't let guys keep leaving. You need talent. And there were times this guy was playing on the top line with Connor Bedard. And I don't think that's what you want long term. I don't think he's that kind of guy. But you got to fill out a second power play here, right? Like you've got to, I don't know what they're going to be able to do. Scott Powers and Mark Lazarus over at The Athletic were pouring some cold water here this week on the idea that Chicago would be a factor on the Mitch Marner thing. Lazarus certainly had said in the past he thought they would be active on that. So it seems to me like somebody has told them something. That either they don't expect Mitch to be interested in going there, or that Chicago, for some reason, isn't willing to go where Mitch is going to want to go. Because they both kind of doused, like I said, cold water on it. And I'm not sure that would have been the smartest move for them anyway. They are not a Mitch Marner away from suddenly contending. They've been bad for a while. But I do think they'll improve this offseason. And even with that being the case, you still need guys like Ryan Donato in your middle six who can contribute a little bit, who isn't going to score 30 again, but can we get you to 20? If you've always kind of been 12 to 16, then you jump to 31. If we're giving you opportunities here, as we're still on the come up a little bit, as we still haven't fully flushed out our lineup, and you're going to get some power play time, and you probably will see some nights with Connor Bedard, can we get you to 20 again? And if you can do that, I mentioned Fabian Zetterlund at 19 goals and 41 points for, $4.2 million. If we can get 20 goals out of Ryan Donato at $4 million, I think you'll do that. I think 4 years is a bit rich. The money doesn't scare me. And as we've talked about, as the years go by and the cap keeps going up, maybe you expect less and less out of it, but this is a guy who has bounced around for a while. He's on his 5th NHL team. Did you need to go there? Did you need to give him 4 years? Maybe you felt like you did. In this cap environment, everybody's a buyer this summer. I read something somewhere a couple weeks ago, I can't remember now, that like Pittsburgh is the only team right now who really wants to be rebuilding. And even they are sort of tepid about it. But think about it. The teams you've been looking at for years as rebuilders, they don't want to do it anymore. San Jose and Anaheim think they're on the come up. Montreal made the playoffs last year. Ottawa made the playoffs last year. Buffalo did not, but they aren't trying to lose. They're trying to get better. Detroit. Columbus made a hell of a run last year. I don't think they're going to try and sell anything off. They're going to keep trying. I'm trying to think of who else have been shitbirds that, was doing it intentionally and wants to get Philadelphia. Like, there's not a lot of sellers out there right now. There's not a lot of rebuilders out there right now. So maybe somebody would have said to Ryan Donato, if you wouldn't, as Chicago, yeah, we'll give you 4 years at $4 million. Let's go. So I guess that's necessary. Like I said, it's not the money. It's the fact that he's bounced around so much and appears to wear out his welcome pretty quickly. And you had to go 4 years to keep him. Makes me a little uncomfortable. Reminds me of Max Domi and how well that's going for his current employer. The other thing we saw on Thursday was Matt Duchene. And this one did catch me off guard. This one was a bargain in any cap environment, in my opinion. $4.5 million for 4 years for Matt Duchene. And this is a guy over his last couple of years is still paced out. He's had some injuries, but he's been on pace to be like a 70-point guy. And in Dallas, they're not asking him to do most of the heavy lifting, right? This is a guy who's going to play behind Wyatt Johnston and Roope Hintz, occasionally on the wing with them, but they don't mind using him as their third-line center. And so even at his age, I believe he's 34. I believe he is the same age as John Tavares. And he was going to be, I think, right there with John Tavares as kind of the two big center options if Sam Bennett stays in Florida, as a lot of people expect that he will. And so to see him go, yeah, I don't even want to hear about it. I'm going to re-sign now. I'll take $4.5 million. I got to throw in the obligatory cap-free state. But also a good team. He's bounced around a lot in his career too, right? Between Colorado and Ottawa. I think he did a little time there after one trade deadline in Columbus, down to Nashville, bought out there, on to Dallas. The other thing worth keeping in mind, I suppose, as we talk about this being a bargain and him being willing to sign in Dallas for 4.5, he's still got a few years of Nashville buyout kind of propping up his income. And I think this year it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 million. And then for the next 2 years, 1.5 and 1.2, I think. So while Dallas is only giving him 4.5, he will be getting significantly more than that for the next couple of years. So I like that move. But it is interesting to me that he didn't even want to hear from other teams on July 1st. The reason for a Sam Bennett to not go there is pretty obvious. After midnight on June 30th, if he's not re-signed in Florida, they can't give him 8 years anymore. They can only give him the same 7 that anybody else could give him. And so we saw that last year with Sam Reinhart at the last minute. If you're still willing to go 8 years, I'll sign at 11:50 p.m. or whatever the hell it was. Matt Duchene wasn't getting 8 years from anybody at his age, so he doesn't have that same pressure. But I would have been at least curious. What would Minnesota be willing to give me right now? What would Chicago be willing to give me right now? You know, I'm sure you got a team on your mind that you think might be interested. A lot of people speculated Toronto because anytime there's a name and a guy who can play center, that James Myrtle has twice said on the Leaf Report podcast in a fairly dismissive term, I don't think that guy's got any interest in going to Toronto. So apparently that's not on the table for them. But there was no real reason other than the fact that maybe he felt like I bounced around. I don't want to go through the process again. I'm comfortable here. We're a good team. I'll stay for 4.5, give myself some stability. And some players are just like that. And it's not like he took it in a loser market like John Tavares is apparently preparing to do. They're a good team. And they're better with him. So $4.5 million for a guy who has paced out at being at about 70 points. If he falls off that pace over the next couple of years, and he probably will at the same time that the cap's going up, you probably don't mind. They haven't been afraid of keeping their Tyler Sagans and Jamie Benns down in their bottom 6 for a long time after their prime. Matt Duchene can just become one of those guys, and maybe that works for them. But, you know, I did mention the ripples that it all creates. I kind of hinted at John Tavares there a second ago. I think on one hand, it's however you want to tell yourself this is going to play out if you're a Toronto fan. On one hand, hey man, Matt Duchene was like your closest comparable in age and being an offensive guy first and all these sorts of things. He just took $4.5 million. Even if we factor in the no tax thing versus the Ontario thing, we also have got the thing where you've made it pretty clear you want to stay here so the team has the leverage. You know, let's pull that number down a little bit, closer to 5.5. The other part of it is John Tavares just found out that if he goes to July 1st, if he wasn't already going to be one of the prizes, and let's face it, he was, because he was the leading goal scorer of any available UFA this year, he just got the notice, essentially, that if I go out there on July 1st, my price just went up. A fallback plan has disappeared. Teams who thought, well, if we don't get John Tavares, we could at least get Matt Duchene, or vice versa, whatever order you want to have them in. That guy's off the market. We better press extra hard. Maybe we throw in an extra $500,000. Maybe we throw in an extra year, whatever that looks like. John Tavares can also now say to the Leafs, as much as they're saying, hey, see, 4.5 for that guy. Keep your number low, John. He can say, hey, that guy's off the market. My number actually goes up. Because not only does everybody else not have a fallback plan, you don't either. So it's a double-edged sword. Like I said, maybe that was a guy Minnesota wanted to talk to, especially if they are willing to trade Marco Rossi. Well, you can't talk to him now. He gone. So everything has its little pieces where it's all attached, right? Fabian Zetterlund, Matt Duchene, Ryan Donato, all signing within 12 to 24 hours of each other at fairly similar numbers, and all for very different reasons. And if that's the neighborhood we're playing in right now, if that's the sandbox we're living in right now, the Sens got a great deal here. The youngest guy of the bunch, the guy who's bounced around the least, and he fell right in the same neighborhood as these three guys, or as these other two guys who are a little older, but also have a little more reputation. good or bad, between probably Duchesne for the good and Donato perhaps not. Interesting day. And I think we're going to see this stuff coming fast and furious now. I believe tomorrow, or today as you're listening to this, is when the buyout window opens. We've already heard that it sounds like Chicago will be buying out TJ Brody to either create a roster spot or maybe create a little cap space, which they already have a lot of. We've seen rumored, although nothing official yet, that the Oilers are going to give 8 years to Trent Frederick, which is a choice, I guess. That can't be your priority. This soon after losing a cup is to lock up a third line. I think he had 4 points in the playoffs for 8 years. I don't think you need to really do that, but whatever, you do you. It's difficult, I understand, to get free agents to come to Edmonton, but that effect has been blunted a little bit as long as you have the 2 best players in the world on your roster. Free agents will come. Guys will waive their no trades. We have seen that. Speaking of the 2 best players in the world, we did hear Connor McDavid talk. Everyone's reading a ton into it at his press conference, that I got to talk to my family, and he hesitated here, or did you see that? Guy just lost the cup again 72 hours ago. He doesn't have to make a decision right now. I fully expect that this won't be done on July 1st, but it doesn't have to be. I still remain strongly in the camp that he is staying in Edmonton, as most guys do. His buddy's there. He's kind of set up there now. He's become a legend there. They got unfinished. Frankly, I think if Edmonton would have won one of these 2 finals, there was a better chance that he might look to go and do something else. But I think these athletes are wired in such a way that's like, no, I'm part of this group and we haven't gotten it done yet. I want to be like Trent Frederick and get my own 8-year deal and stick around. So I think the fact that they lost makes it even more likely to what was already very likely that he will sign, but I doubt it happens July 1st. And like I said, it doesn't have to. We've seen these go into mid-July. We've seen these go into mid-August. Wasn't the Matthews one 2 years ago? 3rd week of August or something like that? I think you let this guy go, decompress, get away from, the pressure, the noise, the questions, everything that goes into it. And look, those questions will only get louder and louder the longer he waits. People get a little antsy. I certainly understand that. But I don't think this is getting done on July 1st. I think this gets dragged out a little bit. Not publicly, not bickering back and forth in the media, but just he goes away for a while and you wake up on August 7th or whatever and they announce his extension. So I have very little interest, time, in jumping up and down about he wasn't emphatic. I'll definitely be back at his press conference today. I know that's what everyone wanted to hear. It didn't happen. I don't think it means anything. If you've heard the way this guy talks for however long he's been in the league now, it's always fairly monotone. It's always fairly, low energy. That's all this was to me. And he, just came off losing a cup, and now he's answering a bunch of questions he doesn't want to be answering. And frankly, it would be true. You would go and talk to your family. Do we want to stay here another 8 years for sure? Is this what we're doing? But at the end of the day, I think this press conference was a big old popcorn fart that doesn't mean a whole lot of anything. It's the 3rd week of June, and people are desperate for big hockey headlines, as if the Stanley Cup final didn't end 3 days ago. That's probably enough. I had a couple other little things, but I droned on and on about the Minnesota Wild, of all things, the beginning of this. So we'll probably just leave it here. Rob's back on Monday. Angela Thompson will be back next week from the Lake of Bays Brewing Company. Man, big news from them this week. They're merging/buying up Sawdust City, which is a fairly well-known and prominent brand. I'll wait to get some more details on that. I'm not sure how much Angela will be allowed or able to say on that when we get into it. but I'd been hearing some rumblings for a couple days that something was coming out of Lake of Bays, and that turned out to be it. If you recall, when they merged with Merit, they also, called it a merger, and it wasn't a merger. So we'll see what the agreement's going to look like on that. I got a couple of feelers out, trying to ask a couple of questions on that. But she'll be here. They've got new summer beers we want to talk about. No doubt we'll talk a little Sens with her, some Ottawa sports stuff. We'll look forward to that. A bunch of irons in the fire for over the course of this summer. I think we're going to be, frankly, loaded down with guests. Not in a bad way, certainly. But looking forward to keeping that going. It's interesting. Each summer, some people get harder to reach because they're on vacation. Some people get easier to reach, more willing to come in, have a pint or two, and just kick it around. So the way things seem to be shaking loose right now is more of the latter this time, which is awesome. That'll do it for this week. We are back in studio, as I said, slowly getting our feet underneath us again, getting things pieced back together. Rob back here on Monday, and hopefully from there, at least for a little while, we'll be back in the normal swing of things before I do that disappearing act of my own and start doing some more shows from the lake over the course of the summer. So we'll cross that bridge, which also goes over bodies of water when we get to it. On that terrible piece of wordplay, we'll kill this for another week. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Matt Robinson. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend. We'll see you Monday.
That's it. I cannot work under these conditions. If anybody wants me, I'll be downstairs at McDougal's. Call the weekend guy. I don't care.